The Blair Witch Project is a movie that implies a lot more than it shows. It invites the audience to play detective, to try and figure out the unfilmed plot events. A number of questions inevitably pop up during the story. Is the witch real? And if it is, why does it target the central characters? Is it just a bunch of insane local witchcraft devil worshippers following the group and tormenting them at night? How can they walk in one direction for a day and end up in the exact same place? Is there something else haunting the forest besides the witch? These are just a few of the many unanswered questions that this movie poses, but while the audience are consciously pondering over these possibilities, the film is subliminally doing lots of other stuff to unsettle the viewer. Before we start getting into those details though, some more background context. Inevitably, multiple theories have popped up over the years that try to provide a logical plot structure to explain all the events in this film. Some of the theories are downright stupid and easily disproved, others are more plausible, but I'm yet to find a conventional plot logic interpretation that makes sense of everything. The task of making sense of it all isn't helped by the reported production history of the film. Apparently a lot of the dialogue was ad-libbed, and so the dialogue may not always fit with the intentions of the writer-directors. But that doesn't mean the dialogue is meaningless either. The actors may have infused their own interpretations into the story, or they may have understood the intended themes and successfully embellished them. The film's direction also reportedly didn't involve the directors being there to shout action and cut or give detailed instructions for retakes. Apparently the actors were given assorted notes and sent out into the forest to film on their own, which is a very unusual way to make a film. So the actors effectively took part in the writing and direction by ad-libbing and by filming without the official directors being present. And to confuse matters even further, the marketing of the film included online false promotion of the Blair Witch myth being a supposedly real historical event. Apparently the actors were falsely reported missing as part of the marketing push, being that the actors used their own real names in the movie. But all this cleverly deceptive marketing, if it's true, in turn casts suspicion on all of the production reports about the film. Was Blair Witch Project really shot in the manner that the filmmakers claim, or are those claims just marketing trickery as well? Given all these factors, there may not be a conventional narrative explanation which can explain all the details and unfilmed plot events. Instead, I think this film has multiple overlapping explanations, multiple themes. It has many things going on at the same time. It's a psychologically complex experience without a single solve-all answer. And this is why the film continues to fascinate audiences, this is why it has rewatch value, and this is why the film still generates a lot of discussion. It must be said, however, that there are plenty of people around who really don't like this movie. Folks who talk about it as just being a gimmicky experience, devoid of any real depth, lazy and technical production, and not scary at all. Personally, I've always found this film incredibly creepy since the first time I watched it, even though I hate those stupid made-for-TV ghost documentaries, and I never liked any of the copycat movies that tried to repeat the same found footage horror formula. Blair Witch Project seemed to have ingredients that the imitators failed to identify. Personally, the first time I watched Blair Witch Project, I made the mistake of doing so alone after midnight when I was already tired. Afterward, I had a terrifying dream that a large witch-like silhouette was approaching my bed, and I screamed my way out of my sleep. And then I realised, okay, that was an effective movie. It might look cheap as hell, it may be technically of the lowest standard, but it worked. It got to me subconsciously. So I'm going to bypass formal plot explanations in this study. Instead, I'm going to talk about this movie as a raw nightmare experience on an aesthetic, sensory level. You see, I've come to the firm conclusion that whether the filmmakers intended it or not, the formal logic plot mysteries of Blair Witch Project are basically one giant distraction. We are encouraged to keep guessing logically what is happening at the story level, and in turn, the visual and sound details play on us subconsciously or subliminally, enticing us to conjure up nightmarish subconscious images so that we scare ourselves, basically. I believe this is the central psychological factor that is crucial to the film's creepiness. What the film doesn't show in a literal sense, it implies, not only through dialogue, but through the use of symbolic imagery, sound effects, and the non-verbal behaviour of the characters. In fact, the film is very sophisticated on this level. It has to be to compensate for its rock-bottom budget. And it hits us with these subliminal cues very rapidly because a lot of the scenes are incredibly short, some lasting just a few seconds. Communicating rapidly tends to bypass conscious attention more effectively. The opening scenes of the film, which set up the plot before the characters trek into the woods, is especially packed with subliminal suggestion. So I'm going to start at the very beginning of the movie and take you through about the first 12 minutes chronologically, as we examine some interesting and potentially symbolic details. But before we do, let me just say that the interpretations I'm going to offer are highly subjective, and so it would be misleading of me to claim that my experience of the film is precisely what the filmmakers intended. Some of it will be happy accidents, some of it will be unique personal associations on my part, and undoubtedly your experience will be very different in places. And that's all okay, because I'm not here to try and discount your experience or provide a definitive theory to end all theories. If this study helps you to explore the film for yourself in a more satisfying way, then that's mission accomplished for me. At the same time, I'll be looking forward to hearing any interesting observations or interpretations that you can give in return. Let's get started. The opening titles just look like white text on a black screen, but there are subtle things going on here. The Haxan film logo looks like an occult symbol, or perhaps a bit like a scythe or an axe. Notice also that the logo isn't resting still on the screen. It's shaking just as the movie will be shot in an almost constantly shaking handheld manner. This has undoubtedly been done intentionally. When the logo disappears, it doesn't just fade out, the camera loses focus of the logo as it fades. Again, intentional. There will be repeating instances in this film of handheld cameras struggling to maintain focus on objects, either through manual or automatic focus adjustments. This isn't just cheap filmmaking, it gets used thematically. The film title appears, but not in the centre, it's off on the left, an unbalanced image, as if typed on a page perhaps. And the subliminal shaking continues. Same shaking for the background story caption as well. And no music so far, no sound effects, no cast or crew names. Okay, now the very basic fact that we never actually see the dreaded witch character in this film, not even in the end scene, this in itself obviously entices us into forming our own internal impression of what the witch looks like. The film title itself tells us that there will be a witch in this movie, and so we go into the film expecting to see her. Now we could just think of it as lazy, uninventive filmmaking to just rely on the audience to scare themselves in this way. However, this movie uses a lot of trickery to assist us in forming quite a specific internal images of the witch, and it gets to work on us in this way in the very first camera shot. We go from the black darkness of the titles to an image of Heather appearing slightly sinister. She's a good-looking girl, but she has dark hair, a dark sweater, and dark lipstick, all of which make her skin look comparatively pale. She's a gothic-looking girl, faintly witch-like, especially with those dark arched eyebrows. On the plot level, she's one of the victims, and here she's just providing an introductory comment and stating the environmental setting as her home. But right from the very first moment I saw this film, I instantly got the impression here that I was looking at an alluring but slightly creepy young witch, like a dressed down version of those vampiresses in the old Hammer horror movies. The details of this shot seem to support this. If we slow the footage down, we can see that her pale face up close and out of focus against her black hair and clothes is kinda creepy. The film could have just started with her in a properly focused wide shot on a tripod. After all, we're in her home, and she must own a tripod. But this shaky, blurred close-up transition is much more suggestive. And then there's Heather's poses. She's talking about her home, which we see very little of, but she is the subject of this shot. Her arm gestures seem to be suggestive too, starting with hands behind her head, then holding her hands out, perhaps like those stick figures that we see later in the film, or like a witch revealing herself to us for the first time. Essentially, this opening shot implants an image in our minds of a dark, gothic female presence. Cut from this to Heather's books on forest survival and gothic legends. Notably, 2 of the books are upside down. Turning things upside down tends to be symbolic in witchcraft. For example, an upside down crucifix is considered by some to be an occult symbol. A pentagram turned upside down is also associated with the dark occult. Heather's notebook starts off upside down. It has symbols crudely drawn on the front, both right way up and upside down. So this is a good one for conspiracy enthusiasts. It's got the sun, triangles with capstones, and something written about eyes at the bottom with an eye drawn underneath. Now, I personally don't think the Blair Witch Project is about secret societies in the classic sense or anything like that. Even though that would make for a great clickbait video, conspiracy audiences would lap that up. However, this notebook strongly suggests that Heather has an interest in the occult generally, and the simple aesthetic aspect of these books being upside down is that visual disorientation is a big factor in this film. So that might be why the books were filmed in that way. Heather is wearing black gloves here too, which might be suggestive, being that the witch will be described later as having black hair on her hands. I think that's more than likely a happy accident though. After this we meet the other two central characters. Mike lives in a very large house, blood red door, a colour which will be significant in several scenes, a skeleton hanging over his shoulder. After all, the story takes place in October, so Halloween is coming up. But this skeleton could be thought of as a bad omen, a subliminal bad omen in relation to what's going to happen in this film. The curtains in the front windows are closed even though it's daytime. It's unusual, isn't it? And there seems to be some dark objects hanging in the window too, maybe dream catchers or another Halloween decoration of some kind. Can't really see because the image isn't detailed enough. But note that the camera dwells on the window a bit here. We also don't get to see Mike's mother, even though Heather asks to.
Don't we get to meet your mama?
So think about it. In this shot we have a big imposing house with windows that we can't see into, a skeleton hanging by the door, and an unseen older woman inside. Is this a foreshadow of the witch in a big old house at the end of the movie? Could be. After some shopping, more Halloween decorations, ghosts and jack-o'-lanterns in a window. A little bit obvious, that one, isn't it? But it's a nice contrast with the fact that we don't actually see any ghosts or witches in the film at all. But the next shot isn't so obvious in its witch implications. We cut from the white ghost to this girl with a miserable expression and very pale skin. Like in Heather's first scene, this girl is wearing black. She has dark hair, pale skin, dark eyebrows. A couple of lit jack-o'-lanterns are carefully kept in shot on either side of the screen. They're lit in the daytime. Now, I'm not sure if that's often done in the US. I always thought it was typically only done at night, but hey, I live in the UK and I know that Halloween is a much bigger thing in America than it is here. Heather asks this girl if she's ever heard of the Blair Witch, and while she gives a vague and boring answer, there are cut-out images of witches flying on broomsticks hanging from the ceiling. They're completely black, fitting with the description given later that the witch is covered in black hair. And the ceiling fan is making these hanging witches move. Those props are very easy to miss, but undoubtedly these witch images are included in the shot deliberately. Note also the black decor of this cafe. Dark floor, dark table covers and dark chairs. Combined with how the girl is dressed, this place looks like an undertaker's. She has an earring at the top of her ear, no big deal, but when she lifts her hand up to touch that ear, she has an odd bracelet. Is that a magical gemstone of some kind? I can't tell. Is she into gemstones and witchcraft and occult and that kind of thing? And just to the left of this girl's head, what is that object high up in the room? It looks like a big pair of owl eyes. I'm not sure what it is, but there will be something much more definitive in a forthcoming interview shot that will happen in a couple of minutes. And what's that thing hanging on the door there in the background? I'm not sure. But anyway, this shot only lasts a few seconds, but it's a loaded image. Straight after this, a brief shot of Heather with a dark cat image right behind her as if it's stepping out from behind her back. The camera operator here has framed the shot to keep that snarling cat face image in the frame. I mean, if he was just filming Heather, then why not have her face centre shot? Quite funny that this cat, this visual prompt, not prop, I said prompt, is present as Heather says,
I don't want to go cheesy. I want to really avoid any cheese. I want to present this in as straightforward a way as possible, and I think the legend is unsettling enough.
That's quite deceptive because actually the film itself is not straightforward. There's lots of psychological trickery at work. Now something happens at the end of this shot that will recur many times in this film. A sudden white flash, with the camera then adjusting exposure at the start of the next shot. And I suspect that some of these white flashes and exposure adjustments have been done in the editing room. In this instance, right after Heather says the legend is unsettling enough, we get the white flash, like a subliminal shock, but the first frame shows her face flashing white. Now that shouldn't happen. The exposure shift ought to only be happening in the shot that we cut to. So this flash appears to have been done in the editing room. Unless there's maybe a frame interlace issue that caused this, but I doubt it. The black and white camera is 16mm and uses proper film reel, so it wouldn't be interlaced. So as far as I can tell, several of these white flashes in this film are done to hypnotically unsettle the viewer. In the following shots, there's a sound detail that proves that the footage we see in this movie isn't just shown in the way it was filmed. It has been tampered with in the editing room beyond the basic use of shot-to-shot cuts. We see Heather putting on her lipstick, but her voice is heard even though she's not speaking.
Ceremonial first slate.
Absolutely.
That's not relevant to our topic of subliminal suggestion, by the way. I'm just pointing out that changes to the footage have been made in the editing room so that we aren't just watching raw captured footage. In fact, a great deal of the off-screen dialogue could have easily been recorded elsewhere and then edited in. Inevitably, the assorted sneaky editing changes each serve a purpose. Now we get some very obvious dialogue implications about forthcoming supernatural doom.
Here he is, filling out our first slate for our first shot.
Should we all, cut our fingers open and bleed on it? A little bloodletting on the slate?
No, we'll save that for later. Okay.
Kiss the slate. This first slate.
First slate, marked by my lipstick.
Heather says the slate is marked by her lipstick, which happens to be dark lipstick, probably blood red. Noteworthy, though, is that this mockery of the supernatural is done in a graveyard. So, like it's an insult to the dead. Mike is wearing red, and I think he wears this for the rest of the film, though it's easy to overlook because he's often filmed in low light or with the black and white camera. Next shot, we see the Burkittsville sign with house on one side of the road and gravestones on the other, the living and the dead in the same shot.
This is Burkittsville, formerly Blair. It is a small, quiet Maryland town, much like a small, quiet town anywhere.
Again, Heather's voice has been edited in because the narration continues into the next shot, at which point she's looking very gothic, dark hair, pale skin, in black and white, and camera getting up close in her face. She's very witch-like. She makes a statement that blurs the line between the living and the dead.
No more than 20 families laid their roots here over 200 years ago, many of whom remain, either on this hill or in the town below.
Not sure why there's a big dug-up mound of earth there. Incidental, I guess, but in between the graveyard and the distant town, there's a field of cattle. I wonder if that was deliberately included in the shot, cattle to the slaughter, or maybe the townspeople as cattle. As she talks of there being lots of kids buried here, small gravestones are shown, which suggests small kids, even though that's not actually a ratio issue regarding age of dead people, but also an infant gravestone too, suggesting sacrifice of babies. A shot of an angel-winged child in white stone or marble, referring to the souls or ghosts of the dead kids. But crucially, I think this is a foreshadow of what we don't see when ghost kids are heard laughing outside the tent later on.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus.
So you can see how a lot of little psychological details are being implanted in the viewer and how we're being encouraged to create quite specific internal images of ghosts and witches. Some other things here. I think the sound of crickets or grasshoppers can be heard across these shots. It's almost like music.
It is a small, quiet Maryland town, much like a small, quiet town anywhere.
And I wonder if that was dubbed in. The wind is blowing Heather's hair, suggestive of some unseen presence. None of these shots are filmed using a tripod, which any documentary filmmaker ought to be carrying about with them, so the handheld thing is consistent in this film, and it's rare that the actors are actually able to hold the camera steady. They seem to have the permanent shakes, suggesting an ongoing state of anxiety. Heather says,
Yet legend tells a different story, one whose evidence is all around us, etched in stone.
That sounds like a foreshadow, doesn't it? In the final scenes, Heather and Mike will encounter children's handprints all around them on the walls of the burned down house. In the final shot of the cemetery, a very low camera angle has lens flares from the sun coming down toward one of the headstones. looks almost kind of magical. The wind can be heard, but also the faint noise of an airplane from above right at the end of the shot. I mention that because it does happen again in another scene later, and in both scenes it seems to have some relevance. This shot is spiritually suggestive, and the airplane can be heard from a higher plane, literally. We cut from this calm spiritual cemetery moment regarding dead kids to loud noise and shaky camera in the car as they drive into the town.
Yeehaw! Well, we have shot the first scene, the cemetery scene, the opening.
Again, it almost comes off like an insult to the dead, like these filmmakers are just there to exploit the memory of the tragic dead and take commercial advantage of what happened to them. This is important for instilling a sense of guilt, but at the same time it's almost like a ghostly boo cutting in from the spiritual cemetery shot. Attention is briefly given here to a black car travelling the same road with them. I don't know if that was something that was specifically arranged for the shot. Could be. So now we get into the town and there's interviews with the townspeople. Look at this. Large woman with dark shades and dressed in black, and a kid wearing a blood red sweater. Am I imagining things, or is this suggestive of a child murdering witch with one of her victims? I'm not sure how much direction was given to the kid here. He seems to be placing his finger over his mouth in a be quiet gesture, like he doesn't want his mother talking about the legend, but then he seems to pick his nose and eat it. This fella mentions that the psychotic guy who lived up in the woods would take two kids and make one face the corner while he killed the other. As we all know, that's a dialogue set up for the final scene where Mike and Heather are presumably killed. He also mentions his grandmother being the one who told the story, so that's quite a sinister grandmother, and again, associations to wicked witches who are generally thought of as old women.
Yeah, it's a story my grandmother used to tell us all. Make us go to bed early.
Really?
Say if you stay up after dark or walk around the house too much, a Blair Witch will come and get you.
His statement that the witch will come in and get you if you creep around the house at night, I think this foreshadows Mike and Heather creeping around the house ruins right before being attacked at the end of the film. Back to the witch with the bloody torsoed kid. The villager with her son. The kid is now freaking out about the story of two guys who went camping and disappeared, which foreshadows Mike and Josh disappearing, of course.
Near the cabin or something that she's supposed to haunt.
Uh-huh.
No. And they disappeared off the face of the earth.
No. Really?
Okay, it's all right, Ingrid. I'm just...
The kid doesn't want to hear it, and obviously this is a story that the kid has overheard the adults speaking about before, or maybe it's been told to the kid directly. And I wonder if this mother has done the traditional thing in this village, which seems to be to tell this kid to go asleep at night and not creep around the house, or else the Blair Witch will get him. By the way, we are told that kids and campers have been historically killed in the area by this witch, but so far we've not been told how they were killed. So again, that's a blank area in which we have to fill in the details for ourselves for the time being. Were they fast murders or sadistically slow? Were they surprise attacks, or were the victims terrified into oblivion first? Now another interviewee in another cafe. Remember the first cafe girl with something over her shoulder that looked like a pair of eyes? Well, right above this girl, a picture of what looks like creepy owl eyes. Owls can see really well in the dark, just as the forest-haunting witch seems to be able to do the same in this movie. Interestingly, in the build-up to this shot, the other guy was talking about the child killer being able to feel the eyes watching him.
That in court that he couldn't take the eyes on him. He could feel the eyes watching him. That's why he made him face into the corner like that.
All my life, really.
And we cut straight from that to this shot with the girl staring at us and the owl eyes above her. It's a little bit creepy, isn't it? Like with the first image we saw of Heather and the girl in the first cafe, this girl is dressed in dark colours. She says she absolutely believes in witches. And then we cut to this old guy's ugly mug suddenly and uncomfortably close to the camera. He could play the Blair Witch, couldn't he? Dark cap. He's filmed in the shade instead of out in the open sunlight. And you might think I'm being nitpicky on the lighting there, but Heather does say in a following scene, find the best light.
I'm gonna grab her and bring her out. Why don't you take a look around to see what the best light is, all right?
And who films a documentary interviewee right up close like that? I think this has been done for a subliminal shock effect. The film is repeatedly using incidental but suggestive imagery to help us form an internal image of the unseen witch. And this guy's got a kind of witch-like face, hasn't he?
I remember Mr. Parr was an old hermit.
Right.
And he lived up on the mountain. He had a place up there, been there for a long, long time.
Now this much more normal looking guy talks about a crazy old woman called Mary Brown, who we're about to meet. But also in this shot we have one of those weird instances of a white flash that doesn't seem to belong in the shot, like it's been added in the editing room. I've mucked around with a fair few video cameras in my time and I can't recall any random white flashes happening like that. In fact, the timing here seems to be almost in answer to Heather's question.
Crazy lady.
How was she seen by the community?
Crazy.
The witch as a white flash. That's interesting, isn't it? So we're already primed to expect Mary Brown to be scary and witch-like, and she does not disappoint. The weird gate made out of sticks tied together is undoubtedly related to the stick figures that we see hanging in the forest later on, suggesting that Mary Brown is either the witch or that she has some connection to the witch. After all, she describes seeing the witch and surviving unlike anybody else, and she has the classic facial features of a witch: large chin, hooked nose, intense eyes. Initially she is viewed from a low angle, making her appear tall or as if she is floating. The witch is described in another scene as having feet that never touch the ground, which would make her tall and domineering. As Mary describes the witch physically, with an emphasis on black hairiness and a strange face, Mary herself is filmed up close to accentuate her strange face. But this is done out of focus, much like when Heather was first shown to us in her witch pose opening shot. The blurred images thing is important in this film because it helps provide a basic visual archetype upon which we can mentally fill in the details. In the following scene, Josh says he screwed up focus.
Fucked up on the Mary interview. I'm checking my depth of field chart to see how bad.
But really, what kind of camera operator messes up this badly on focus? I mean, I've been on lots of film shoots, low budget film shoots, and I can't remember anybody messing up this badly on focus. Now the group talk mockingly about Mary.
Thank God she's not in the film business, man. Can you imagine?
She thinks she is in the film business. She also says she's a ballerina. She
out.
says she's a historian writing a book on American history, and that she's a scientist who does research at the Department of Energy.
She may have looked odd, but she was actually really polite and nice to them. And Heather also mentions that Mary claimed she was a ballerina and that she worked for the Department of Energy and was writing a book on US history. All three of those statements seem relevant thematically. Ballerina girls tend to move about as if they're floating, just like the Blair Witches claim to. Mary claiming that she works for the Department of Energy, well, spiritual energy perhaps, being that she looks like a witch. And her interest in US history, well, the witch herself is a historical entity going back hundreds of years. In fact, very close to the founding of the US according to the timeline given on the Blair Witch official website. In the car, they also debate over imperial versus metric measurements.
See how bad.
So you measured for meters? What? We're not in Europe.
Well, the fucking lens has meters on it, okay?
It also has our system.
All those are meters.
What about the brown ones?
The brown ones are feet, yeah, but the white ones are obvious.
But I thought
Again, the conflict between historical and modern viewpoints, but also conflict between European and American viewpoints. After all, witchcraft dates back to medieval Europe. And the fact that Josh couldn't read the measurements on the camera because they were in brown, not white. Perhaps this is related to the issue of things being present that we can't see, which is a central psychological factor in this film.
Okay, I've got everything on video, man. Oh, Jesus Christ, I didn't even fucking see these, man.
Now the three of them are staying in a motel, and at one point Heather feels the need to have the two cameras filming each other at once. On the one hand, this lets us know that the ongoing story will be filmed entirely with these two cameras running at the same time, but look at this image of Heather and Mike, creepily backlit and silhouetted. She looks like a witch again, even more like a witch this time. And look at their reflection in the mirror, where Mike becomes an especially creepy silhouette, a dark, featureless figure, vague in identity. Then zooming into Gothic Heather pulling weird faces as she downs some scotch. Seems like a pointless thing to show, doesn't it? But, you know, it allows her to look a little bit odd again. I'm finishing off in this location. Heather films into a mirror and seemingly filming us, the audience. She's dressed in blood red, just like Mike, just like that terrified kid in his witch mother's arms. And after this, the campers trek off into the forest for the rest of the movie. Alright, so I'm going to stop there. Now I am happy to do an extended version of this video covering the entire runtime of the movie because there's loads more going on that I haven't covered. I mean, this video is only about these basic aesthetic subliminals. There's plenty else going on in this film, even in those opening scenes. And I'll be happy to put out a full version of this video as a freebie on YouTube. However, I've been noticing that something weird has gone on in the last couple of months regarding view counts. I had 3 videos so far this year that initially were doing very well, each going rapidly viral, until something happened with YouTube's algorithms. First was my video on Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which rapidly clocked up over 140,000 views. Same thing happened with my short Full Metal Jacket film analysis video called Born Again Hard. That one very quickly racked up over 130,000 views. And the third one was my video Full Metal Jacket and the Universal Art of Brainwashing. A couple of days after I uploaded that third video, and it had racked up around 30,000 views, that video was suddenly de-indexed by YouTube and Google, which owns YouTube, which basically means anybody who did a search on YouTube or Google for that video, it would not show up, even if you typed in the exact title of the video. This has never happened to any of my videos before, so it may have been a technical error. I had my Facebook followers from multiple countries search for the video by its title both on YouTube and Google, and it turned out that the video was de-indexed across the globe. It was not showing up in either Google or YouTube searches, yet it was showing up in other search engines such as Yahoo and Bing. The video was re-indexed within the following week. I don't know if somebody manually fixed it or something just updated that fixed it. However, its initial viral run on view counts had been killed off by that point. But strangely, about 2 weeks later, the other 2 viral videos that I posted so far this year, they suddenly dropped simultaneously from getting several thousand views a day to approximately 100 views a day. And all 3 of these videos have been stuck consistently on about 100 views a day ever since. And yet my other many videos from over the years that have large view counts seem to be unaffected by this, and the total views on my channel haven't dropped off in parallel. The problem only seems to apply to these 3 recent viral videos. Now, I'm not jumping to any conclusions about why this happened because I simply don't know. None of these videos were particularly political or related to any other controversial topics that would typically get them removed by moderators. But at the same time, I've never had these kinds of sudden and consistent view count drops on a popular video in more than 10 years of posting on YouTube, and certainly not happening to 3 viral videos in the space of 2 weeks. So I'm giving YouTube the benefit of the doubt and assuming this to be a technical error. But being unimpressed with this and the fact that YouTube search algorithms have been increasingly prioritizing corporate content over everyday user content, which defeats the very point of it being called YouTube, may as well call it CorpTube or ThemTube if that's where it's all going, I've decided to just post a short version of this Blair Witch video for now. So if you like this vid and you want to see an extended version exploring the subliminals across the entire Blair Witch Project movie, then I ask you to do 3 things. Leave a like for the video, leave a comment that you want to see the full version, and share this video where you can on social media. If there's an algorithm issue going on relating to my recent viral uploads, then maybe you can help break that algorithm in this video. If this video hits 100,000 views or 10,000 likes, whichever comes first, then I'll be very happy to edit the rest of it and upload it on here on YouTube as a freebie. No paywall, no Patreon subscription, and it would likely be at least an hour and a half long, maybe even 2 hours. In the meantime, if you want more content, head over to my website, collativelearning.com, check out my Patreon page, and you can follow me for updates on Facebook and Twitter. If you aren't getting notifications of my latest content here on YouTube, then click on the notification bell to make sure that you do, and bookmark my website and then check in once a week for the latest updates on there. Thanks for watching, folks. You've been listening to Rob Ager. Bye for now. Stay free.